Greetings, it's 5 a.m. in Atlanta, and I am going to Mobile, Alabama to check out Africatown. Let's go. Yeah, finally, I have arrived at Mobile, Alabama. It was 4 hours drive from Atlanta, but I finally made it. So, hey, we're going to continue the trip to go to Africatown. What's up, Sadia?
Now, our great city started back in 1702, and it was King Louis XIV that wanted to get access to the Mississippi River, because the Mississippi travels all the way from New Orleans to Minnesota, throughout the country. And it was about commerce. They wanted to get goods from this new country back to Europe and Asia to make product to bring back. So he contracts with two explorers out of Quebec, Canada. They were the Lemoyne brothers. And so he says, listen, I want y'all to find me access to the Mississippi River. So they set sail out of Canada, and they actually end up in Pensacola.
Oh, all the way straight down.
Yep. And Pensacola was occupied by the Spanish. They had weapons. They didn't want that war. So they turned around, they went back out into the Gulf and headed west. Well, they took a little too sharp turn to the right and ended up in the bay because they were trying to get to New Orleans. And they ended up 27 miles north of Mobile in a place we call Chastain, Alabama. Set anchor there for about 9 months. A great flood came about, outbreak of yellow fever, and it pushed them back to this location. Okay. Now, what you see over to the left is a replica of the original city of Mobile. This was done in 1976 for the bicentennial celebration of the United States. It's 1/3 the size of the original city, done on a 4/5 engineering scale. But once you go in, it is identical to the original city. All right. Now, it's called Fort Condé because it's in honor of King Louis XIV's nephew. That was his name, Condé. Y'all, but the original city, it was an onion field, which was flat and high, and it was occupied by the Marvilla Indians. And that's how Mobile got its name, from the Marvilla Indians. Well, did y'all come through the tunnel? Which way? Y'all came down 65, didn't you? Have you been through the tunnel?
No.
Okay. So to get across this body of water, we have two tunnels that go underwater, and then we have a bridge out in Africatown, and we'll see that. Well, the original city is about where those tunnels are. Okay?
Wow.
And that's how the city has moved inward. But this is a replica, and once you go inside of it, it's exactly the way the city was back in 1711, 1723. Now, when you came out of those gates, you were out of the city of Mobile. Okay, that was it. The king, being the gracious person that he was, he sent the second ship. And the second ship had females on it. He sent those females to marry the soldiers so he could grow the community. Well, we found out that those females were actually orphans from the Roman Catholic Church. And their chaperones were nuns. And they did come, a lot of them married the soldiers, and they began to grow the community. Well, there was a third ship to come from the Dominican Republic. And these ladies were African American. And during this time, Mobile being a seaport town, Very few regulations, wide open. It was just very loose. The wives would let their husbands have girlfriends. It's just the way it was, and it was acceptable. And a lot of those girlfriends had children. Well, those children were called Creoles. A lot of people don't know the definition of a Creole. It's not a race, it's a culture. So it's usually an African American mom with a French or Spanish dad. Offspring is a Creole. I have a lot of Creoles in Mobile, a lot in Louisiana, and there are a lot that still live in the city today. And so we'll talk about Creoles a little further into the tour. But just kind of want to give you a frame of the makeup of the city since the inception. And when this fort was built, it was built by whites, Indians, African Americans, slaves. We also had what they call, we were colored back then, free coloreds, and they were masons, bricklayers. So it was, and Cajuns. So it was a combination of everybody that bricked the fort during that time. And that's where our city started from. And I kind of just wanted to, again, paint that picture of the makeup of the community. Now you were asking about this building. This was City Hall. We had a commission form of government, 3 commissioners, police chief, fire chief. All the city administration was done in this building, including the jail was here, okay? And in 1979, Hurricane Frederick came through Mobile, took parts of the roof off, flooded the building. Y'all, because the water is 1 block over, there was 5 feet of water down here for months. So they had to move everybody out of the building, temporary locations, West Mobile. And there was debates about demolishing the building. But after many debates, they decided to keep it open. And during that period, we also had a county courthouse. It was a 2-story county courthouse on this green space right here to the left, okay? And they actually demolished it. And then we built the twin complex over here, which is the city and the county administrative courthouses, and everything is in that structure. And then this became the History Museum of Mobile. And our office is in this building on the 2nd floor as well. And so that's just kind of and then the person that was the owner of our local newspaper, the Mobile Press Register, he left the city a bundle of money and wanted this to be a Mardi Gras park. And so you'll see the Queen on the pedestal to the left, and you can't see the King on the other side, but he's on the other side of that middle section. And this guy right here on the corner is referred to as Joe Kane. And he started Mardi Gras back after the Civil War. Lemoyne. Lemoyne. So, yeah, Lemoyne. So, they founded Mobile in 1702. New Orleans was not founded until 1718 by Pierre Lemoyne. 16 years later, they brought the celebration from France to the New World, started Mardi Gras in Mobile, and then they took it to New Orleans 16 years later when it was founded. So we say we're the birthplace of Mardi Gras.
Do they do a big celebration?
We do. And we just glad all them crazy people found out about New Orleans. So they can go over there and we can have fun.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time every year. And just to give you a little background, Mardi Gras, actually, it wasn't Mardi Gras, it was a Greek celebration for the harvesting of crops way, way, way back. And the church, I think, became a little maybe jealous. So they started Mardi Gras. And it correlates to the liturgical year of the Catholic Church. So 10 days after Christmas is when the three wise men brought the gifts to the baby in the manger. Well, Mardi Gras starts here. Y'all, you ever heard of the king cake?
Yeah, I've heard of
It's
that.
the round, like cinnamon, big
With the
round,
baby Jesus
with the
on it.
baby in it.
Oh,
And
okay.
whoever gets that piece, then they have to have the next party. That's the whole process. Because they cut it up, everybody gets a piece. Nobody knows where the baby is. But whoever gets that piece, then they have the next party. That kind of starts the celebration. So there are parades, debutante balls, luncheons, and all of this stuff right up until Fat Tuesday. Well, Mardi Gras is French for Fat Tuesday, okay? And then after that, you have 40 days of fasting right up until Easter. And then it starts over the next year. So it's a continuous, but it's coordinated with the liturgical church year. And so we have like kings and queens and parades. That last weekend down here, you can only walk because there are parades every day from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, continuously. That Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So it's like a big spring break for everybody. And it's a fun time, okay? Blacks have always been 50+% of the population in the city of Mobile. But there were 5 other libraries, but this was the only one that blacks could go to up until the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964. It was much smaller. If you look at it, it's identical to our main public library. When I give you the brochure, you're going to see that Dora took this library and put it in the front doorsteps of our main public library to demonstrate how much smaller it was than the main public library. Now, what we did not know was that when they got new books, we got their old books. So we made lemonade out of lemons that we had because we didn't know. What I did know was that my mom and teacher never told me that I could talk. We were that place. I was scared of them ladies. We come out of there, we might be fighting in the street out here, playing football over there, but in there, we went in there, we got our books, we did our projects, and we came out of there. We did not ever test them ladies because that one look, you knew was zero tolerance, okay?
It was a library in North Carolina.
Okay, so it's just amazing because it's a different world today. So then in 64, when the Civil Rights Bill was passed, we could go to any library. All the other libraries were larger, they had more resources, so they closed this one. And they made it the National Archives Museum for African Americans out of Mobile. A lot of their artifacts were placed in here, like Mardi Gras queens, dresses, and regalia, and there was some generals that put their uniform in there, and just a lot of the civil rights historical information. Well, this building has a basement in it. We don't have basements in buildings in Mobile because it just doesn't get that cold. And the architect for this building was the premier architect in the 20s, George Rogers. He designed most of the elaborate, nice structures in the city. And he was from Connecticut, went to school in Chicago. When I was going in there, it was not AC. They didn't put an air conditioning in there till the early 90s. And personally, I think that it wasn't engineered correctly. And humidity from the basement probably started creeping in, and then finally mold creeped in the walls, the ceilings, the HVAC system, and they had to close it. They removed all the artifacts. They're now at the main history museum. And we have a county commissioner by the name of Monsieur Logood. She's African American. She says, oh goodness, I can't let them bulldoze another building. This is history, we gotta save it. So she came in, put the wheelchair ramp, the bathrooms are ADA compliant, replaced all the walls, the ceiling, the HVAC system, removed all the mold, and it's gonna open in about 3 months as a cultural museum to salvage that history and probably be the anchor for other areas to start to grow back in this area. This was not our Black Wall Street like Tulsa, Oklahoma, but this is our Black Main Street. 98% of the businesses on this street were owned by African Americans. You could come to this street, buy any and everything you wanted to, and feel safe. In the 20s, it was named Davis Avenue. And of course, in the 60s, they changed it to Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, but this is where Blacks would do all of their shopping, and this was during the period at. If we could do a real quick, we passed the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. In the 1870s, Blacks were in every walk of life in democracy. Mobile had like 8 Black representatives in our state capital. Louisiana had a Black governor. South Carolina had a Black U.S. senator. Blacks were in every walk of life throughout the country, and democracy was working like it was supposed to. And then we had the Great Compromise in 1876, and that was when Rutherford B. Hayes was running for president, and there was a 2,000 vote difference, 200,000 I think it was, or 2,000, I forget those numbers. Sometimes I get mixed up on these numbers, and then there was some electoral votes that were lacking. And so the decision was going to have to be made in Congress, kind of like what happened 3 years ago. They took a script right out of that area. And so it went to Congress, and Congress made a deal, and that was called the Great Compromise. And they told Rutherford B. Hayes, and if y'all remember, the political systems were reversed as what they are today. The Republican philosophy was like the Democrats today, and the Democrats' philosophy was like the Republicans. So the parties were flipped. And they told Rutherford B. Hayes that we will make sure you are president if you remove all of those federal troops out of the South. Because after the Civil War, when they lost, they brought the federal troops in to restore stability in this area. But the plantation owners were still upset because they lost all of that free labor. And so if they got those federal troops out of here, they could start back to doing what they had been doing all the time. Most people didn't know the 13th Amendment had a clause in it that said if you were incarcerated, you could be subleased out to work. So they got Rutherford B. Hayes as president. The first thing he did was remove those federal troops out the South. States like Alabama amended the state constitution to say that if you were incarcerated, you could be subleased back out. So they incorporated all these stupid laws like a lot of them. If they saw a brother standing up on the street corner, they would just arrest him, put him in jail, sublease him out, right back to the plantation, okay? And, we've got some remote locations in this state. You don't know what goes on. And so the first policemen were Confederate soldiers because they had the weapons. And then after that, we had all of these. You had the Ku Klux Klan. They came in to intimidate blacks from voting. Then you had Jim Crow, colored entrance, white entrance, colored water fountain, white water fountain. Then you had in New Orleans, the brother sat on the train car that said he was going to Hammond. And they said, you can't sit there. He says, yes, I can. No, you can't. He ends up in jail. Case goes to the Supreme Court, Plessy versus Ferguson. The result was that this first train car is going to be for whites. The second one, just like this one, is going to be for you coloreds, because we were colored back then. We don't want to sit with y'all. Y'all can't sit with us. Well, then that parlayed all the way down to schools, libraries, restaurants, buildings, water fountains, all of this crazy stuff that went on right up until 1954. Brown versus Board of Education, things loosened up a little. 10 years later, we passed the Civil Rights Bill. Then we could go to different schools and they closed ours and bust us to theirs, and libraries were the same way. It then opened up any of the libraries. The next year, the Voters' Rights Bill was passed. Blacks didn't have to guess how many bubbles were in the bathtub to vote and pay a poll tax. All of that stuff went away. And then 50 years later, Alabama was the first state to contest that Voters' Rights Bill. It was called Holder versus Shelby County, which is a place right outside of Birmingham. And the decision was that you need 2 forms of ID to vote, which is not that challenging, but everybody don't drive. And they didn't tell the rest of the country that when they implemented that, they shut down the driver's license offices in those locations where you would get the second picture made. So if you lived in some remote county, you might have to drive 2 hours to a metropolitan area to get a picture made. You're 75, 80 years old, it's not gonna happen. It was a subtle form of voter suppression. You see why I say voting is the biggest bullet we got. And right now, here we are 50 years later, and what we're fighting. Somebody give you a bottle of water. It's all this crazy stuff. And them putting Secretary of State in places that if they don't like the results of the election, they can flip them. I mean, it's scary. It's really just amazing how far we have gone back. I mean, a lot of this stuff is not active yet, but they're trying to put this in place for the next election. And so we really have to be awake as to what's going on. Now, here's one. I think we talked about the Statue of Liberty. Didn't we say something about the Statue of Liberty earlier? Mentioned. So, the Statue of Liberty was presented to the United States by France as a gift. And it was given to us as a gift, but the person that it was a constitutional guru. His first name was Eduardo. I can't remember his last name. It was like Lambule or something. But it was a gift to acknowledge the abolishment of slavery. Most people don't know the first statue had the torch in the left hand, and in the right hand, it had the shackles broken. When they saw that Reconstruction was taken about and everything was changing, they put the shackles down by his feet, and the robe is partially covering it. And in the right hand, they put the document July 4th, 1776. And they flipped the whole reason to acknowledge immigrants coming versus the abolishment of slavery. And if you go to New York today, in some of the museums, you will see a replica of the original statue. and the story. You have to dig real hard to find this out. But didn't you think that would have been just, to me, as a kid, if I had known that they put that big statue up there to acknowledge the abolishment of slavery, and they thought enough of that, and then they flipped it, to acknowledge immigrants. But the information is there, but it's not in the history books, and you have to dig hard to find it out. Those are the things that we do and share, and it should be in the history books. We shouldn't be talking about this, in a van. Yeah. So then we had something come through Mobile, y'all, called urban removal.